Welcome to Off the Grid, a podcast for small business owners who want to leave social media without losing all their clients.
Let's go off the grid. Okay. Let's go off the grid. Okay. I know that you really want to put your phone away. Yeah. Let's go off the grid.
Hello, and welcome back to Off the Grid, a podcast about leaving social media without losing all your clients. I am your devoted host, Amelia Fruby, and today I have an incredibly special episode for you. My guest is the one and only Sam Vander Wielen. Sam is an attorney turned entrepreneur and the founder of a leading contract template shop that generates a multi-seven-figure revenue annually. Now, if you tune into the show, you probably know that I am the kind of person who sometimes says things like seven-figure annual revenue with a bit of an eye roll because I think that a lot of what the most hardcore girl boss influencers are promising is this type of easy, scalable, infinite growth in an online business. That if you just set up some digital templates, they will sell of their own accord and you can make millions. And I don't think that's the case. I don't think that works. I'm very skeptical of that type of messaging. But I want to be clear that Sam is not that type of business owner. Sam has built a successful online business, but is not out here teaching secrets to success based on some Stripe screenshots or icky income claim marketing. In fact, Sam's business is based in her expertise and in her brilliant business strategy. Since 2017, she has helped over 350,000 online entrepreneurs legally protect their online businesses, also while navigating the devastating back-to-back losses of her parents, her own brain surgery, and becoming a caretaker. And this spring, she published a book called When I Start My Business, I'll Be Happy. So today's conversation is about how your business can and can't make you happy, how self-employment can be an incredibly liberatory act and also an overwhelming and stressful one, and the dangers of putting all of our happiness eggs in our business basket. Sam and I also talk about the role that social media has played in her business success and why she doesn't recommend it as a primary marketing strategy anymore. We get into so many great things in this conversation, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Without further ado, let's dive in. Hi, Sam. Welcome to Off the Grid.
Hey, Amelia, thank you so much for having me.
As I was preparing for this interview, I joined your email list again, or I went back through your welcome flow so I could see how you're welcoming new people in right now. And in your second email, you have this great list of just here's what you need to know about me so that you feel good learning from me. And I want to read that list for listeners because one, it's modeling great nurture sequence behavior for us. So I love that. And two, I think it gives us a good starting point. So are you okay if I read your words back to you for a moment?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. In this email, you say, I think it's necessary to tell you my background so you feel secure getting info from me. I've been an attorney for 12 years. I left law to start a health coaching business online in 2016. In 2017, I pivoted to help online creators, coaches, and service providers build legally sound businesses. I have an evergreen funnel that brings in $100,000 plus per month. I gross well over $1 million in sales every year. I've had online biz crushes like Amy Porterfield as guests on my podcast, which is called On Your Terms and has over 150,000 downloads. And I'm the author of When I Start My Business, I'll Be Happy, a practical, no BS guide to successful online entrepreneurship. This is quite the list of accomplishments. And I'm curious, how does it feel to hear all of that? What does that bring up for you?
Okay, it's probably not what anybody wants to hear or what I should say, but that I haven't done anything. That's honestly, when I hear it, I'm always I don't know. It's I guess that's a lot to have done in 8 years. But when I hear you read that, especially after everything I've been through personally in the last several years, I also hope that everything that you just read is the least interesting thing about me.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating to hear from you. And one, I can definitely relate to that sort of instinct to like self-efface or like brush off the like, okay, cool, yeah, 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 did the things. But also what I'm hearing is this deeper sense of at the end of the day, our businesses are also the work that we do. And maybe we don't want to be defined by our work. We don't want our work to be the biggest aspect of our lives or the most important one or the only thing people know about us, which I think is definitely a shared feeling for many, many off the grid listeners. Like, we love the work that we do. We work really hard at it because it is important to us. And also, we recognize that life is about so much more than work. And so, how do we hold all of this together, especially in a world where like online entrepreneurship requires so much of us? Like, it asks a lot of you and your identity.
I think with what I'm learning right now, going through so much grief and processing a lot of trauma, and I, as you know, because you read my book, I experienced a horrible amount of trauma as a child and all the way through to adulthood. And people or kids, children especially, who are neglected as badly as I was, right? Which neglect is like a lack of attention, then do things to get attention, right? And so sometimes they can become high performers, high achievers. And so, like, I guess now when I hear you read that list, I'm more thinking like, oh, that makes a lot of sense that somebody like me would go and do all of those things and still also not think it's enough and think I have to keep doing more because I'm programmed to think that my only worthiness is my output. And I guess what I'm working on right now, and especially since having lost both of my parents, is like really sitting with who I am outside of all of that stuff. Who am I when I'm not becoming a lawyer at 23? Like, who am I when I'm not achieving something on the volleyball court or whatever?
I appreciate you sharing all of that and how personal both your accomplishments are, but also the ways that you're seeing them as a sort of like coping mechanism or response to the trauma that you've experienced. And I know how much work it can take to realize that, to surface those patterns and behaviors and beliefs and see them clearly. And I'm really grateful that you have that clear vision and that you're sharing it with us. I'm curious, when I hear you talk about those patterns and, sort of seeking achievement and seeking attention, what role, if any, did social media play in that for you? Like, did you go to social media to look for attention? Did you start out building this beautiful business on social media? Like, how did that come into play?
I don't think I consciously thought of it that way, but I can see how it played into certain things, especially because for someone like me, social media is a dangerous playground because it's like I get all these little metrics and stats back that tell me like you're worthy, not worthy, you're liked, not liked, literally. It's like literally baked into the words. And so I could see how that eventually became like very addictive in a bad way. But I would say that like starting out with social media, I felt like I approached it as like a great test playground. Like it's a great place to get a lot of quick data and like test out your voice and your messaging and your writing and like your style, find your clients, like do research, all this kind of stuff. But now when I look back at it, I'm like, it was kind of like when I started on social media, I feel like it's the equivalency of like having smoked in the 1950s. Like I thought like like it was cool, but like we didn't know. We just thought we were being cool. So we didn't know the extent of the harm, or it definitely wasn't talked about as much. And I feel like back then, I know so many of your guests have said the same thing, same sentiment. It felt more fun and playful. And for me as a business owner, it also was way lower stakes at the time. Like it made sense and no one was responding. So I didn't really take it personally. It was more like, hey, this is just a fun thing. And that was a great way to meet people in your like late 20s, early 30s at that time. And I started being able to connect with people all over the world who I had common values with instead of just people who lived in my direct community. And, obviously I got a lot of clients there in the beginning and all that kind of stuff, but it was so much more fun. And like, especially coming from being a corporate lawyer, it was a great experience in getting this like visual playground. Like that felt like my first foray into creativity. There's not a lot of room to be creative in the traditional legal sense. So like, being able to create crappy photos and like collages and then when stories came around in video, like, yeah, it allowed me to flex that creativity a little bit.
I really appreciate that last point because I think it's one that hasn't come up as much on the podcast, but that really resonates with me as well. Like, Instagram was very much a playground for my creativity, both in learning to sort of create different types of things, the things I was writing, the visuals I was making. It really was where I poured a lot of my artistic impulses, the ones I could surface, like into that sort of space. And it brought a lot of pleasure my way at the time as well. Could you tell us, maybe for any listeners who aren't like so familiar with what you do, like could you just tell us a little bit about how you grew your business and like what you launched during those times and what your ecosystem looks like right now?
Yeah, so I sell legal templates, like downloadable contract templates, and then my ultimate bundle, which is like my by far and away my bestseller that gives people like all the contract templates and the trainings that they need on how to legally start an online business and then how to navigate the legal issues that come up as you're trying to run and grow this business. And so for me, like when I started in 2016, there weren't a lot of people doing what I was doing. It was still pretty new. And I think that like Instagram in particular, for example, was a great playground too, because it gave me this opportunity to break down barriers, the objections of, what I would call behind the scenes that people had to people like me, which is that you're stuffy, boring, expensive, overwhelming, intimidating, all these things.
All
And
the
it was
lawyer
like,
stuff.
yeah, all the lawyer stuff and like all the ambulance jokes and stuff, which are pretty well deserved. But, it gave me this opportunity to go on and be like, hey, I'm Sam. Like, I don't wear makeup and I wear normal clothes and look at me. It was just being a normal person. And because I could literally visually display not only what I was doing and kind of like a how I'm building it thing, but also visually display my products, it really broke down a lot of those barriers. So for the first several years, I mean, I've always been very focused on building my email list. So like even if I was on social, it was always just to get them to my email list. Really, that's how I say it in the book. All roads lead to the email list. And so I'm always pushing people there. And that's been the case since 2016. And I didn't ever want it to be my content home, So at that time, for example, I focused a lot on SEO. I have a very SEOable business and niche, for people Googling things about how to start a business or whatever. And so I was kind of just bopping along, selling stuff and selling individual products and all of this kind of stuff. And then my dad got leukemia in 2018 and I became his caregiver. And I noticed something that I hadn't ever needed to stop to notice, which was that if I took my foot off the gas, if I didn't show up on social, if I didn't produce more content, then my business sales slowed down. And that's really when I became like introduced to the idea of a funnel. I had never live launched. I had never had a sale. I never did anything like that. It was always just like this kind of day-to-day promoting my products, talking about my business up until that point.
That's so interesting. That sort of like daily practice of like showing up and sharing really served your business until it didn't, right? Until life got in the way, until you had this like horrible family tragedy. And during that period, were you still trying to show up on Instagram? Like, were you still trying to like be in that space where you're trying to take care of your dad and like be on an Instagram story? Or did you feel the pressure to do that? Like, what was happening in your brain and your body and your business?
Yeah, I mean, talk about trauma response. I was showing up every day. Back then, I don't know if you remember, but it was cool to get on Instagram stories and do like a training every day, essentially. It was
Oh,
like a little
wow.
master class every day. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so much wasted time. But I mean, it was good for reps. Like that's kind of the way I look at it now in retrospect. But yes, I was still doing that until this one day when my dad, he was getting chemo every 3 weeks for a week straight. And so we would have 8, 10, 12-hour days at the hospital every single day. And in between, he was getting all these blood transfusions. And I could see it was starting to take a real toll on him. And I was sitting with him in his chemo room at University of Pennsylvania. And he asked me a question. And I very snarkily told him to hold on because I was trying to post something on Instagram. And it was like, I heard it as it was coming out of my mouth where I was like, ugh, gross. Like, no more of that. And, the lesson to me of that story wasn't like, I should have just quit everything and paid attention to my dad because that wasn't completely practical, financially, nor is it really fair to me. I love what I do and I'm really passionate about it. But I also saw that there was a better way. So I pretty quickly, over the course of like a month or two, built out an idea for a webinar. They were very popular at the time. Mine's still working really well. But the way that I like to conceptualize these things is like I look at the product and then I kind of reverse engineer what the training would be. So it's kind of like a high level outline of my product. And so I created this webinar for it and then wrote an email sequence that would come from after this. And I was like, I saw all around me people doing big live launches, and these big, like over the top things. I was like, I don't have time for that because I can't host a live webinar. I don't want to be on social like that all the time. That seems way too stressful for where I'm at in my life. I'm trying to get my dad health insurance. I'm like, make sure he's going to survive. And how am I going to get him $350,000 of medication a month that's not covered? And so I'm like, I can't do that. So I, against what everybody said was okay or what would work, put this thing straight to evergreen. And from that moment on, I decided, okay, when I do show up on social or even in emailing my list at that time, which was obviously much smaller at the time, it's all going to be to that top of funnel. And that's like the best I can do right now. Getting people to watch that webinar, getting them to go through this email sequence, and let's see how it works. And it worked right away.
I loved what you said about reverse engineering from the product to the webinar. Could you just tell us exactly what was the product? How did you reverse engineer it? And what is your webinar?
Yeah, this is my favorite thing to do. I still do this. And you can take what I'm saying and apply this to freebies. This works so well. I do this all the time. So, okay, my product, for example, is the Ultimate Bundle. And so it gives people a pack of these downloadable contract templates, but it also gives them the trainings on how to form an LLC and how to get business insurance, how to get a business bank account, how to protect your content with trademarks and copyrights. So when I think about who needs my product, who needs that product of all of those things, I then think about, okay, this person is looking for how to start an online business. What are the steps that I need to take? So I'm literally going to create a webinar that's called 5 Steps to Legally Start an Online Business. And it will go over the 5 main points of the Ultimate Bundle. So it goes over which contracts you need and how you know. It goes over how to form a business. It goes over what business insurance is. It goes over scope of practice and making sure you're only talking about things you're legally allowed to talk about in a way that you're allowed to talk about. So to me, in my brain at that time, it was well, it makes sense if the person who watches this webinar is this was so helpful. And if the copy is all attractive to them, on the front end, the bundle was the natural next step. And that's what happened.
I really appreciate you walking us through how you got there. It's who's going to need these legal templates? Well, people who want to start a business, what do I have to offer them? These 5 things that you need to know to legally do this. I also think this speaks to a theme of season 6 of the podcast, where I've really been pushing myself and having conversations about the specificity of our businesses and being really clear that our business solves a problem. And what problem does your business solve? Because I think it is so much easier to sell things when it's clear what problem it solves for the people you're trying to sell it to.
Yeah, I mean, especially in what I do, I'm not trying to manufacture any problem. I'm just speaking to the person who's already pretty problem aware and they don't know what to do about it. They're just not solution aware or they're not product aware. And so I'm always thinking about this awareness scale and kind of who I'm speaking to. I am not trying to convince or convert anyone about anything. People write me nasty messages all the time. I had a guy, I remember he wrote me on Instagram, funny enough, who had said he's owned a gym for 35 years and he's never had a contract. He's never had a problem. Fantastic. I am so happy for you. Good luck in the future. And so I'm not trying to convince him as to why that's important or why he should care. So I think that I don't know, for people who maybe get a little uncomfortable, and I know you talk a lot about ethical marketing here, I don't lead with fear. I think that's also something that's a differentiator for me amongst my peers, not all my peers, but some of my peers. I don't try to scare the crap out of you that everything's going to go belly up if you don't buy my thing, And if any of you have ever sent me an email before asking about my product, you know that I am the first one. I, first of all, respond to all my emails. And second, I tell people, no, it's not for you. Or, oh, here's this other thing you could go do. Or here's some free resources. Or you could get this a year down the line. I'm very honest about that. And so I'm not in the business of forcing.
Absolutely. And I have encountered the online business lawyers on the internet who are if you don't buy my contracts, everyone's going to die. You're going to lose all the rights to everything you've ever put online. Every client you've ever had is going to sue you and take all your money. You're going to lose your house. You're going to lose your car. You're going to lose your kids. I really feel I have seen the people who escalate to those degrees of worst case scenario and telling you that the worst possible thing that could happen is definitely going to happen if you don't buy their product. And so I think your industry is one where that type of really problematic pain point marketing does happen, or I see it quite regularly. And I appreciate that you don't do that. And that is also why you're the first lawyer I've ever had on the podcast. I also think that legal things bring up a lot of fear, and they clearly trigger like nervous system activation for many of us, myself included. I definitely avoided some of the legal things at the start of my business because I had a lot of fear around getting it wrong or being punished. And I see that as just a result of the carceral society we live in. And I try to remember that I can regulate myself through that and work through that. And I'm grateful there are people like you out there who are trying to provide these resources to navigate that system while also taking care of ourselves and not like stepping into the sort of like worst case scenario thinking. So I appreciate that for sure.
And the legal system has done a masterful job at keeping people out and making it seem overly complicated so that people feel reliant on it. And so when I left the traditional legal system, I mean, the reason I'm here doing this today and why I feel so passionately about it is because I want to give people access. And, I've gotten nasty emails or messages from people, from lawyers and law firms and stuff about what I'm doing. And I'm like, I think it's so funny that you guys think I'm like siphoning people away from you. They wouldn't be able to go to you. Under the traditional model, people cannot afford it. And it's just not even accessible, even in just the literal sense of like, they talk over their heads, they talk down to them, like the whole thing. So it's just for women, for minorities, it is not possible. It's just not even an option.
Yeah. It's come up twice now, sort of the people who send you these like nasty and mean messages. How do you handle that? Like what comes up for you when it happens, and how do you like keep going through it? How do you process it? How do you move on?
I got one yesterday that one of my favorites is with humor. And so I'm actually pretty funny, low-key funny behind the scenes. And so I yesterday roundtabled with the team, like my response to this lady's mean email, just because I think it's hilarious. And she was taking issue with my grammar in an email, which always like my favorite thing. So I'm like, okay, wow, you got me. Like, thanks a lot. And like, also, I don't care. And I write emails like I talk because I think that's actually really important from a copy perspective. And like, how are your emails going? I hope you're emailing your list every week if you're emailing me about my grammar. So I think it's funny. And I wrote back this like hilariously grammatically incorrect response that we obviously didn't send, but it was just like really fun. I think on a deeper level, this took years to work on separating my identity from the business, because now when somebody makes a nasty comment or an email or whatever, it's not me. Like, I don't really take it personally. And I also just know that this has so much more to do with whatever's going on with them, and that makes them so uncomfortable. And like, I knew that sharing my story, for example, was going to make some people really uncomfortable, because I remembered what it was even like as a child to tell people that my mother was abusing me or that my mother was an addict and she was doing all these things. And people would be like, you can't say that about your mother. She's your mother. And I'm like, well, my mother's abusive. So like, what do you want me to do? So I guess that there's that. The part I have the harder time with, I would say, I get a lot of anti-Semitic stuff. So that's like a little bit more about me, I suppose. And so that's hard. I still don't let it bother me, but I'm always kind of shocked when it happens and how close to the surface it is for some people. And so I've gotten some pretty rough anti-Semitic emails and a lot of comments on, ads and stuff. And then on the ones about how you look too. I mean, again, hard, but also being a woman, I suppose, and being in this society and people thinking that's up for grabs.
Yeah. This is something that I've been thinking more about, like, quite honestly, just as Off the Grid is growing. And like the first few emails, like the ones you're describing, have started to come in. And like my body was so stressed. My nervous system was so taxed. And I've been trying to like sort of have practices that help me stay okay with that, stay regulated through it. Are there things that you do, or I'm just curious if you have any reflections on, you became a corporate lawyer. So I assume it wasn't like from childhood, you were like, I want to be famous on the internet. But now you have this very large audience and you get both the positive and negative responses that come with that. And I appreciate you sharing them with us, even as I want to like rage against them with and for you. Does it wreck your days sometimes? Is it easy to go into that humor mode? How do you stay regulated when one like hits you the wrong way and you have to like come back to yourself?
Yeah, it did used to wreck my days. It did in the beginning. And then I've noticed that with time, because like I thought about this with the book, like I felt similarly when the book comes out. I'm like, now all of a sudden these are going to be, this book's going to be read by people who I don't know and who I can't like control their perception of me because they're not on Instagram, they're not on my email list or like something like this, And I think like I was telling a friend the other day that like I remember when I first started getting mean Instagram comments, or when I first started running ads and I would get mean comments, or when my email list grew and I got a nasty email. Like at every stage, it stung in the beginning and then I would kind of get used to it. And then, with new exposure came a new like, oh, that's going to feel weird, right? A new arena. And so it's a lot to process. I think that's why developing myself outside of my business has been so important because, the business doesn't provide me with happiness, but it provided me this opportunity to go out and make myself happy or just sit with the fact that I'm content enough to be happy, right? And there's no like grand thing that's coming to make me happy. So I think that, the more that I was able to go be in nature and like be grounded, when my book came out, for example, I live in this like magical storybook neighborhood where we're all like one big giant family. It's the weirdest thing. And all my friends talk about it all the time. And so I went and invited my entire neighborhood to, I threw a huge party for the book coming out. And they were like, you wrote a book? About what? And I was so happy because I was like, I don't talk about it. And I don't mean I don't talk about it because I'm trying to downplay it. And like, that is definitely a thing for me sometimes. But I mean that like, I just think it's so important to create these connections and like community that's not based around business, that's not based around creating content to share for your business. Like, I don't know, I started getting into watercolor. Sometimes I take my watercolor to the beach and I just like sit on the beach. I read only fiction. I won't read other stuff about business. I don't listen to business podcasts. I don't consume a lot of content to try to like keep my head clear a little bit. But I think that has helped me stay grounded. And as we talked about before we get on, I meditate twice a day and that helps. And moving my body. I love movement. I love being in nature. So if I can combine those two things, that's always good.
I love that you threw a book lunch party for you and all your neighbors, and that you also have like a Big Five publishing deal and they had no idea. Both are amazing to me. I'm curious if this resonates with you. It might not, but like for me, there's been this sort of shift in my career path where like when I was starting out, I really like went to the people I knew around me, like my immediate friends, family, and I was like, all right, trying to get something going. Can you help me? Can you help me? Can you help me? But like as it's grown, there's been a more sort of like evolution and just a separation of like, okay, I am not my business. Like in the beginning, I feel like it took everything that I was and every person that I knew to really help sort of like bring it to life. But now that like the business has a life of its own beyond me, which is exactly what we're describing, right? The emails, the books, like all of this is beyond us. Now I think of like my immediate friends and family as like the solace and the safe space where I don't have to be that person I am on the internet. And like I have dinner with my grandmother every Tuesday, and like she does not understand what a podcast is. Like our 5 years of doing dinners have not helped her figure out what a podcast is. She will never know. She's 90. Like it's not happening for her at this point. And some days I'm kind of like, oh, I wish I could just tell you about work and like complain about this thing and you would get it. But I think it's actually better for me that she's never going to get it. And so we don't talk about those things and we do other things.
I think it's really important to have people in your life who don't know what podcasts are. Like, honestly, I think, and like, I'm always really happy when I run into people and they're like, wait, after I saw you the other day, I like Googled you and then your podcast came out. I had no idea. Like, you're like a big deal. I'm like, I am not a big deal, but also please stop looking me up. Like, it's weird. When you see me on a podcast, when you see me on Instagram, I'm at work. And so it is a different side of me. And I don't know, when people ask me, like, how's it going? Great, thanks. Yeah, on to the next. Like, I don't want to talk about it.
And I definitely have my friends, especially my like biz friends who are in it with me. There's sort of just these different like contexts and people. And I think that's really important for happiness in general too, right? Like we can't go to any one person or one thing or one business and expect it to just like make us happy. We have to cultivate this like multiplicity and diversity of interests, of relationships, of work that we do. I think to me, that's like what can lead to a sense of pleasure and fulfillment in our daily lives. Hi, friends. Amelia here, interrupting this amazing conversation to tell you a little bit about the interweb. The interweb is your portal to launching, growing, and running a successful business without relying on social media. It's an annual membership for creatives, artists, small business owners, freelancers, influencers, entrepreneurs, and creators of all kinds who want support sharing their work and making some money without social media. When you join, you get access to on-demand courses taught by biz friends across the internet and monthly live events with me. The courses will teach you how to build foundational business skills and cultivate creative marketing practices. And the events offer real-time togetherness and guided support so you can feel less alone in your journey stepping back from social media, as well as have some answers to the question, where do I go from here? Whether you want to leave social media or not, the interweb is your place to go for guidance and support growing a softer, more successful, more sustainable business that does not rely on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter/X to be profitable. I want to invite you to check out the link in the show notes to either join the waitlist for the interweb or to come on in if we're currently inviting new members in right now. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. I really hope that I'll get to see you in the interweb, but for now, let's dive back into this amazing conversation. Okay, so I want to sort of circle back to online business and to funnels and to launches. And I have this impression that you are like an online business success story. When I look at your business, I'm like, you have the webinar, you have the funnel, you have the 6-figure months, you have the 7-figure revenue, which to me are these sort of like hallmarks of what I've called in past episodes, like an online business growth escalator. I'm like, oh, Sam like killed it at the escalator and is like riding it up. But I also feel like there's just a lot more skepticism about this model than there was when you got started or even in the past few years. And a lot of what we do on this podcast is kind of like chart a course away from some of those methods. So I'm curious, how are you thinking about online business in 2025? Like, are you still finding success with funnels and launches? Do you think this is replicatable if somebody's just starting out? What does any of that bring up for you?
Yeah, I completely understand the skepticism and think it's warranted and valid. And I'm the first one to tell people, like, you should be skeptical of a lot of the people you see on the internet and a lot of the things you see on the internet. And if I can't pass that test, then like I'm not worth you purchasing from. So that's kind of how I feel. And to me, I hope that like the direction we're moving into is focusing more on results and like the impact that somebody's program, product, service, whatever has on them than the gurus, like than the people, So I think that the kind of like even thought leader idea is out. But I also did not actually learn from any of these people and these models, like not directly, at least. I do think we pick up a lot, in just being in the space. And that path was super popular at the time. And so I'm sure I absorbed that. But my business model still works very well. I do 2 live launches a year with 1 live podcast each. That's it. So I just held one in February, just to give like stats for a moment. I just held one at the end of February. A little over 4,000 people signed up for the live webinar. I made $338,000 in 4 days. And I had just had one at the end of October that I did $330,000 in 4 days. So my launches are still very, very healthy. The thing that I'm actually happier about is that in every month in between, I'm still hitting those 6-figure marks. And so I'm more concerned about my evergreen funnel because I want to know that at any moment I could just stop doing that and doing any live launches. I never did any live launches until after COVID. I had never done them. So I ran only evergreen for a long time. And I do see the value in showing up live and like, that interaction, whatever. It's nice. And I try to make it more interactive and people get to ask questions and like it's a little bit more fun having people there. So that model, yes, still works. I would say that now the question is more about whether it's working for me. Like it still works, but it's like, do I want to do this? But it's not really the funnel or even the like launching twice a year like that is honestly, it's such a low lift on our end. It's easy. It's really not very hard. I don't do stress. I don't go overboard. We keep it super simple and it's primarily email driven. And so most of the sales just come from my email list. But I would say that social media is still the primary driver of leads to that thing, right? And to signing up for that thing. And especially because I'm running ads on those platforms, which I personally have issues with. And so right now, you're catching me in a time where I'm like, I don't feel like I'm living in my in alignment with my values because I don't want to support these platforms. But what do you do when this is where the bulk of this stuff is still happening? So, and I know you've talked about this tension quite a bit. It's hard. So I think it's more that I've been thinking about where else can my leads come from, kind of getting back to my roots in a sense and experimenting with other platforms.
Okay, I want to make sure I understand how this is working. I'm sure there are listeners like myself who've never done like a launch to the degree that you might be doing one or have an evergreen funnel. So what I'm understanding you're saying is like you are using social media ads, I assume primarily through Meta, to attract people into your free webinar, whether it's the evergreen one or the live one. And then from there, they get a series of emails. They come to the webinar, either live or recording, and they get more emails and they're sold into your ultimate bundle. Is that correct? That's kind of
right.
And then how much does your ultimate bundle cost? Like through these launches where you gave us stats for, what was it priced at?
It's about $2,000, depending on whether people do like the payment plan. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so like not like a low cost product.
No, I would not
at all.
No.
Okay, so what you're saying is you both have like the evergreen model where people can find you at any time through an ad or through a referral or whatever it might be, and then they come to the webinar, they get sold the ultimate bundle, or you do the launches to sort of like heighten how many people are coming in all at once and sort of like attract a bigger crowd twice a year.
Yeah, I mean, technically it's even simpler than that. I run the exact funnel evergreen 24/7. So it is a recorded version of that same exact webinar with the same email sequence, just with the dates removed. And then twice a year, I just like host it live, essentially. So it's the same thing. I just keep it very stable. What I have played with is offering like time sensitive bonuses that are live. So like, for example, when I ran my promo back in February that I was talking about, if people bought during that week, they got a live call with me the following week. So it's like, if you don't buy, we miss the window for the call. So I just use things like that.
It's so interesting and honestly a little refreshing to me to hear you share all of this, just because I mean, I think I've been out here saying things like this doesn't work anymore, which is not entirely true. And I can own that. Like, I think what I mean when I say that is that it only works in very specific use cases. And I appreciate that you're willing to like come on the show and talk to me about how your business works. And you're also not saying like, this is what I do, so it will work for you. Like, I think part of what works for your business is what we talked about at the start, is like the sort of problem and solution awareness is very high for what you do. And like your top level lead is just any person who wants to start a business could be a potential client for you. So you're starting with such a large number of people. And a lot of the folks that I talk to who are trying to put a sort of evergreen webinar funnel into place, their like highest level group of people who might buy their product is not very big, maybe like a few thousand people. And if that's ever what you're looking at, like if what you do is for a pretty specific group of people, this sort of model is probably not going to work as well for you, just because there aren't as many people for you to put it in front of who are going to want it. Like you need to have a very specific type of business, I think, for this to work so well. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Your business doesn't have to look like mine, doesn't have to look like Amelia's. And our businesses are not the definition of success. And I'm very clear about this in the book about how like I don't believe that like my business is the one to strive for. I think you should strive for the business you really want to build. And that can look so differently for everybody. But I hope you take like more of like the flavors away that speak to you and just leave the rest.
And I feel like it's so easy in this era of like everything is content to get sold these like hyper specific business models as the way we should like all do the thing. And so that's how we end up seeing, you know, like acupuncturists try to build multi 6-figure funnels. And I'm just like, this model and this like practice don't necessarily go together. And I am 100% positive there is an acupuncturist out there who's made it work and can like prove me wrong. And I love that. But yeah, that sense of finding the right fit for you, taking the flavors of the thing, even if you're not totally recreating the like dish that's right in front of me or the dish that's right in front of Sam, like you can be inspired by it in a certain kind of way. And that's also why there's so many episodes of this podcast that are about like cultivating self-trust, cultivating inner knowing, learning to get in touch with your intuition, because those are such fundamental, foundational business skills that are talked about like they're a separate thing, right? Like, oh, like you have a personal healing practice, you have to do all that work. But actually, like that stuff is critical in business. Otherwise, it's too easy to listen to podcasts like this and be like, oh, well, I'll just try to go replicate Sam's business or replicate everything Amelia says. And at the end of the day, that's never going to build the business that you, dear listener, are going to like feel best and, dare I say, happiest in, right?
I think it's actually one of the biggest dangers of being on social media when you're a business owner is that you're absorbing what everybody else thinks and what everybody else says is the way and the trend and the have tos and the can'ts and the blah, blah, blah. You're also, I think, even just by accident, I don't think people are doing this consciously, but you're treating what you see on places like social media, for example, as a rubric instead of an example. And so, you have to also remember that a lot of what you're seeing on social media are people who are making money off of telling you how much money they make. And so, as you know, this is something I talk about a lot in the book, and like how we've also built up this culture on social media of people who are only successful in telling you how much money they make. And then they're getting you to buy something from them. It's like this horrible cycle, right? And no one's talking about the results or their qualifications, God forbid, or how good they are at actually what they do and how replicatable it is what they do. So that's like why I think it's so dangerous and why then so many people look at their businesses, to your point, and think they're not successful when it's like you are never going to be the person on Instagram who's saying that they're selling thousands of this $100 course or whatever. Like that was never going to be your path as the acupuncturist. It's not realistic. It's not true.
Yeah, I think that there's such a slippery slope. And honestly, this is like a fine line I'm walking all the time as a podcaster, as an online business owner and creator, as now both of us, like people who have written books. There's this fine line of like pulling back the curtain, being transparent, sharing our story and how it worked for us, taking away lessons from that maybe can speak to other people's experiences and what they're trying to do in the world. And also not just falling into the like, I did this so you can too, like simplification of it. Like that's so oversimplified and it's so often not true. Like each of us lives in such a specific context of our lives, right? And, I really appreciate kind of, Sam, how you started this conversation by like really opening up and being like, there are all of these like hyper specific events that have happened in my life that created conditions that were actually like quite traumatizing. And also, a lot of that led to why I achieved so quickly and in this way. A lot of that led to the type of business I pursued and its growth. And now I'm reconsidering if that's something that I still want, right? Like nobody can build your business because nobody has the same life that you had. And it can be so easy and tempting to fall into that rhetoric of, I did this so you can too. And I'm always trying to like pull myself back from that edge, quite honestly, like as somebody who does like live in this world of podcasting, content creation, parasocial relationships. It can be hard to like not fall into that, I think.
Yeah, because you want to inspire people. Like I want people to know what's possible for them. But when I say what's possible for you, it doesn't mean what's possible for you is what I've done. And I don't say that because I'm on some like pulpit. I'm saying that because I don't even know that that's the goal. Like that doesn't have to be the goal. And so that's really complicated. And I'm also trying to work on, honestly, like if I was to own anything about what I do in my business, which I am bad at, I am good at marketing. I will just say it. I am very good at marketing. I'm very, very intuitive with marketing. I literally dream about like different marketing sequences. I dream about nurture sequences. I dream about marketing stuff. And I've been like this since I was a kid. I used to go into businesses as a child and be like, this is what they could do to do better here. And so that is the way my brain works. For a lot of my customers, their brain is really good at whatever their like niche is, like whatever their service is, right? And I don't have that. I don't feel like I'm as good at that, but I'm good at my marketing. And so like you also have to just sometimes own, I don't know, sometimes I don't think I look at what I've done enough and just say like, I'm just also really good at marketing. And it worked out in that sense that then that helped me to market a good business. Maybe your thing is that you're like so good at your product, you had an incredible product idea. And maybe that's the reason why you need some help outsourcing the marketing, right? And really owning like the part of your business that you are really good at.
Yeah, absolutely. And then not taking for granted that like when you own that, I think then you can also be honest, like, yeah, I don't know, you won't necessarily be as good at marketing as me.
Yeah. It's also hard to explain. Like, I said to my friend the other day, like, it feels to me like writing about fragrances. Like, that's the way I can explain it. I'm just like, this stuff just happens so naturally. It also happens very fast. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't want to face or recognize is that this is all one giant experiment. And so you're looking to all these gurus online who are telling you like the way and the trend and the 5 steps and the 3 ways and the whatever. They're already like, by the time that I can tell you, as someone who could very easily create that content, I'm already 16 steps ahead or away from that thing if I had posted it by now. And if you're not, you're going to be left behind, frankly, because the stuff is changing in real time. And I'm experimenting. So, like things you see me doing, it's not because it's right or the best way, but it's often because there's something about what I'm doing that I'm like, oh, I think this could be something or this is a good idea. I'm going to try this. Some of those things work and some don't.
I think that like one of the gifts of having been in business for many years, and I'm still relatively new. I've only been running my current business for about 4, almost 5 years now. But when I talk to people who've been in business for much longer, what I always find is like we figure out the basic things that work for us. Like could be having, a webinar in a funnel like it has been for you. It could be a weekly newsletter like it is for many people in my space. It could be a podcast like it is for me. Like we figure out like, okay, this is like the foundational thing that works for me. And we count on that to some degree. We stay in that practice. And then we build in all the experiments to like try something new, see if it works better, see if it feels better. And all of those experiments, like they have this sort of like additive cumulative effect. So when I hear you say that, I'm like, yes, we are always being experimental in business, but we're not always starting from scratch. We're not always starting over, right? It's like you have the foundation and it's like the experiment is like, okay, do I put some extra emails here? Do I go on this type of podcast and see if I can get people from there? Do I show up at this conference? Like it's meant to be fun and interesting. And I think that's what the online business owners or any business owner, like who loves what they do, it's because we like the experiments and we like the challenge of learning new and different things. And it's important to know that going in, like there is no like set it and forget it business. It is always about the experimentation and the evolution along the way.
I would even argue that having that foundation, like whatever it is for you, whether it's your email list or your podcast or whatever, is like what allows you to go out and do all those experiments. Like that's what makes me feel a little safe. Like, I mean, I've worked so hard to build up my email list and continue to do that every single day. And 47,000 people are going to get my weekly newsletter, Sam Sidebar, every week. And so I'm like, okay, I've kind of like got my homework done. So like now I can go out and play. That's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, I like that framing. And it's also just like, to me, this is my version of a pep talk to the folks who are just starting out. I'm like, it also takes time to find the thing, like what your foundation is going to be. And I see a lot of people like grinding at a weekly newsletter and hating it. And I'm like, maybe that's just not your thing. And also sometimes it is our thing, but it's not like resonating. It's not hitting. It's not getting the audience. And we have to keep going until we figure that out. And I have so much like care and empathy in that part of the journey because like that was me for like 10 years before I started this business, right? Like I have been sharing online for a really long time and it took a long time for me to figure out what my path was. And for me, that included leaving social media. Like I had to do that to get to this point because as long as I was grinding on social media, it was always this like sort of shiny thing that wasn't working for me, but I wanted it to so bad that I couldn't look away and I couldn't actually get to building the thing that like has been that foundational vehicle for my current business and where I hope it's headed.
That's kind of where I'm at with social in the sense that I'm feeling like it's more of an energy drain now than it shouldn't like garner so much of my attention. And that in order for me to go where I'd like to go, I think I need to step away from it. So it's interesting to see that and to see like the people who I'm kind of looking to as that like next echelon of where I would move towards, they're not on it personally. Like they probably have somebody who's doing something, but like they're not on there. They're not spending their time. So that's kind of where I'm looking to for inspiration these days.
And that, again, takes us back to your sort of like 1950s tobacco example for me, where it's like all the execs quit smoking before they stopped selling cigarettes.
Yeah.
So we see that with social media as well. Well, if you have enjoyed this conversation, I highly encourage you. I will even go as far as to say, like, I think you absolutely should go buy a copy of Sam's book. It's called When I Start My Business, I'll Be Happy. And it really walks through all of the sorts of things we talked about today, like how to think about starting a business, how to find a type of business you want to start, how to get set up for success. And then also, like if you already have a business, the second half of the book is going to be great for you because it really walks through Sam's approach to marketing that does not rely on social media, which I appreciated, obviously, as the host of this podcast. Sam, is there anything you want to tell us about your book right now or share with listeners before we wrap up for today?
I can imagine that a lot of listeners here are here because they feel so overwhelmed about not just what you hear on social media, but just in general. I mean, we take in a lot of information these days. So what I've heard from the thousands of people who have read it already is that it was a nice, like, quiet, safe space to go and learn about building an online business. But more so that it was refreshing to also read a business book that didn't like proselytize one type of way and really encourages you to build a business that works for you in your life. And especially if you're somebody like me who's been through a lot personally, or you have some very fun, positive thing happening in your life that's just pulling you away from your business, then I would definitely encourage you to read my book and come listen to my podcast on your terms since you like podcasts.
Absolutely. Go listen to Sam's podcast. It will be linked in the show notes. Okay, and my final question for both of us today, Sam. Since the title of your book is When I Start My Business, I'll Be Happy, and the title of this episode is How Your Business Can and Can't Make You Happy, I just want to know, like, what's one way your business is making you happy this year?
I think it's that the people reading my book who have been reaching out have felt very seen, and in turn that's making me, feel very seen because they're connecting with my story. And I advocated pretty hard for my book to include my personal story of having lost both of my parents, my mom being killed, me having had brain surgery right after I started this business. And so I pushed for its importance. They didn't really always understand it. And to hear everybody's feedback of like how they see themselves in it, I think that has been really cool. And I also would just say that you might have heard this episode and think like, boy, she must work all the time or something to have this kind of business. And I will also say that like, it's not because it's my business is easy or anything like that, but I keep things very simple and I don't add a lot and I don't make my life and schedule very complicated. So it's also making me very happy that my business provides me a lot of spaciousness and calm. Like I have a lot of flexibility. I don't work crazy hours. I'm not attached to my phone. So I'm able to take care of myself. And actually, it's my plan to take off this summer and take off social media and all that kind of stuff. So like, I'm very grateful for the business to be in that position.
That would make me super happy, a summer off of working and social media and all of that. That sounds great. And I feel so similarly about what's making me happy in my business right now. It's a lot of like time freedom and space to work on my more creative projects and connections with the amazing people who listen to this show, yourself included. So thank you so much, Sam, for joining me for this episode of Off the Grid. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. I will once again recommend going and getting a copy of Sam's book and tuning in to her podcast. And until next time, we will see you off the grid. Thanks for listening to Off the Grid. Don't forget to grab your free Leaving Social Media toolkit at offthegrid.fun/toolkit. This podcast is a Softer Sounds production. Our music is by Melissa Caitlin Carter of Making Audio Magic, and our logo is by Natelier Studio. I'm your host, Amelia Ruby, and until next time, I'll see you off the grid and on the interweb.
Let's go off the grid. Okay. Let's go off the grid. Okay. I know that you really want to put your phone away. Yeah. Let's